Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Let it all hang out. DNA brings the car people out. The artistic, so gifted. African ancestry gets it. Yes, they black owned for the people. In the roots, they will find your sequel. Genetic test in the process, peaceful. Reunite, multiply with your equals. Black scientists, research it. Invest in that time, you're worth it. Experience feels so perfect. Get on the right path to your purpose. No other in the industry like this. Find your link to a tribe, precise kit. Mende people, Mendenga, Volanta, the house. I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. Cameroon, Guinea-Bissau, Sierra Leone, gotta let me show ya. Nigeria, Bioko Island, Liberia, I wanna know ya. AfricanAncestry.com, the pioneers in genetic tracing for black people. Since 2003, doing what no other in the industry can do by tracing your DNA to the present day African country, ethnic group, or tribe. What better time than now to find out where you came from? Order your kit today.
Hey everybody, woo, thank you for your patience. Shout out to Wendi Cherry, our Facebook, or not just Facebook, our African Ancestry Live producer for putting out the fire and getting us back up here. Hello everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I see new names, I see familiar names. Welcome, welcome. You know how we knew we weren't on Facebook? Because we didn't see any of you. We didn't see Blind Guy, his wife, their life. We didn't see you, Valerie. We didn't see you, Zenobia. We were like, where is everybody? And we realized that we weren't connected to Facebook. So I'm very happy to see all of you here. Yes, Onyx, Barbie, you made it. So glad to have you here. Sydney, thanks for being here. Norma, all of you. Monique Brewer, shout out to Monique over there in LA. Good to see you. Hey, Robert Lambert, Michelle, welcome everybody. I'm Gina Page. I'm the president and co-founder of AfricanAncestry.com. You know, if you're here, you know who we are. We are the pioneers of genetic ancestry tracing for Black people around the world. And our mission is to help transform the way we view ourselves as Black folks and the way we view Africa. We do that through DNA. We are a unique ancestry testing company in that we don't tell you that you're from Africa. That is not why we exist. We don't tell you that you're some percentage African, some percentage something else. We're not the company for that. We don't tell you you're fifth and sixth cousins. We're not the company for that. We don't tell you your health traits based on white people's DNA. We're not the company for that. We look at a single branch of your family tree and trace it back to wherever it was found prior to the slave trade. So for most of us, one branch of the family tree is going to go back to Africa, to an African, present day African country with a group of people in it that has a long history of traditions and values and cultural practices and beliefs that have informed you without you even knowing it. And that's what we do. We reconnect Black people to their source. And our source as Black people is Africa. So we come to you every week on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Some of you who tune in from Europe and other parts of the world, is much later. And you always put a smile on my face when you tell me you're tuning in from Ghana or you're tuning in from the UK, because I know you're serious. You're about the guests we have. You're about the knowledge that we are getting from the guests we have and that we're sharing with you, as is everyone else who is, you know, within 1, 2, or 3 hours. You guys are on it. You're here every week, and I don't take you for granted. So thank you so much. We got Fulani in the house. We got Yoruba in the house. We got the Mende, the Balanta. Hey, Micah, Muka. Sorry, I probably said your name wrong. We got everybody in the house tonight. And our guest tonight is one of my favorite people in the whole wide world. I have a joke with Dr. Jeff Menzies. Whenever I say the name Dr. Winbush, I never just say Dr. Winbush. I always say Dr. Winbush. I love Dr. Winbush. He's got a long he's got a long name as far as I'm concerned. But Dr. Raymond Winbush is joining us tonight, and I'm going to let him tell you his other name. He is the director of the Institute for Urban Research. He is an activist. He is a scholar. He's at Morgan State University running his research. And, you know, his life's work is helping folks understand the impact of racism, white supremacy in the global African community. So you know that that's why he's here, and he's part of the African Ancestry family. Dr. Winbush, his work has impacted you without you even knowing it. If you've seen Judas and the Black Messiah, he was the researcher that Ryan Coogler went to, and we'll have him serve up some dish on that. He went to in preparing for that movie. If you are a Dr. Francis Cress Welsing follower, student, fan, he is the author of the Osiris Papers, Reflections on the Life and Writings of Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. He is a reparations expert. Long before reparations became a quasi-mainstream word, Dr. Winbush had published Should America Pay? Slavery and the Raging Debate on Reparations. He also published Belinda's Petition, A Concise History of Reparations for the Transatlantic Slave Trade. And then, of course, in line with some of the powerful work he does around Black boys and men, he created the Warrior Method and has a book that explains the Warrior Method, A Parent's Guide to Raising Healthy Black Boys. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring on Dr. Winbush. I love Dr. Winbush. Hey.
Hey, Gina, how you doing?
I'm Black and proud and grateful, Dr. Winbush.
That's
and
right.
I told everyone today wasn't the best day, but I was looking forward to 7 o'clock. Everything was going to turn around at 7 o'clock, and it turned around at 6:45 when I saw your face. So I know you have been on a lot of videos today, and I thank you for joining us for one more.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one.
So you guys, I want to... Dr. Winbush is part of the African Ancestry family, and I want him to share with you his name. And when he tells you his name and what motivated him to take the African Ancestry test, I want to see some emojis. I want you all to respond with your country flags in the chat so that he sees how we respond to the excellence that comes to this screen. So Dr. Winbush, share your new name, your newest name.
Well, you gave it to me. You helped give it to me because, first of all, you got to spend your money in the Black community. And African Ancestry is the only one that I feel confident in. People come to me all the time. I ain't going to name some of these other companies, but they'll say, well, they told me I was African, like, duh, you know. So you helped me locate. I wanted to get my mother's and my father's DNA, and I just didn't want to just pick a name out of nowhere. So my mother's ancestry dates back to the Dakar people of Cameroon. And so my first name is Takari. My father's DNA traces back to Bioko Island in Equatorial Guinea. And so I named my last name Bioko. So it's a name of balance, you know, my mother and my father, as well as location, because I wanted my children to know where we came from as a family. So I'm really grateful and thankful to African Ancestry for doing that and helping me out on that. Well,
it was an honor when I learned that you took our test. So that that works both ways. And you were one of the first people. You got your results quite some time. It's been many years.
A long time ago.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember that.
I want to say it was like 2008 or 2009.
Yeah, it was early. It was very early. Yeah.
And you've always been a champion of the work and always been a personal resource for me for putting things in perspective and helping to provide some balance. I'm glad you mentioned that you took both tests and the reason why, because one of the things we are talking about this month is family. Yeah. And when I went into my network to figure out who could talk about family, you were at the top of the list. And I wanted to get a sense from you, Dr. Winbush, about the differences between traditional African families and then the way that we have interpreted family in the diaspora. But if we start with Africa, how has the family changed, if at all, from pre-slavery to post-colonialism?
Well, one of the problems, Gina, is that most of the people that have written about African kinship patterns have been white people, and they're never going to write about it in a way that reflects our perspective. The African family primarily, and you know, is generalizing because you talk about West, South, East, and so forth. Primarily, it was extended. Primarily. The image, of course, is that every man was in a polygamous relationship with, you know, 4 or 5 wives or something like that. That holds true primarily in Muslim countries like Senegal or Gambia or something like that. But as a whole, it was an extended family. I was in Ghana just a few years ago, and I was sitting around a table and at this family's house, and they asked me, how far did my children live from me? And I told them about 700 miles. And they just couldn't understand that. They were living in a compound, you know, in, you know, Accra. And within that compound, there were like 3 or 4 generations of children. So they didn't understand issues about, they knew what daycare was. But this idea of apartments and houses that are hundreds of miles away, it's more foreign to them. After enslavement, you have white folks writing all kinds of bizarre research about the Black family. I always think that the reason why white people focus on the Black family so much was because they wanted to destroy the most basic unit. And the most basic unit in any society is the family. So if you look at the best research, I don't turn to white folks' research for our, you know, to understand who we are. I turned to Andrew Billingsley, the former president of Morgan State, where I teach. He did a, you know, a breakdown of 4 types of extended family in the Black community, as well as single parent families. You can turn to Margaret Spencer, who I went to school with at the University of Chicago when God was a child, you know, a long time ago. And you can look at the work of Robert Hill, who used to teach at Morgan State as well. And he talked about the strength of the Black family. You know, and there's so many stereotypes. Like one, I'm gonna just throw one out, and then, you know, I don't want to monopolize this, but Black fathers, the idea of the absent Black father is more of a myth than reality. There's research, recent research, that shows that Black fathers who are divorced or separated or have children by a Black woman spend more time with their children than white fathers, you know. Wow. And the first absentee fathers in this country were George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. Those are the first absentee fathers, were white men, because they had their way with Black women and they left those children to go. And white people, and white males particularly, have don't father, white males do not father their children as well as Black men do.
So when you talked about when you mentioned the 4 types of family structures that is it Dr. Billingsley?
Yeah, Dr.
Dr.
Billingsley.
Billingsley created. What were those? What are they?
He talks about, I'm looking at my notes, extended family, which includes grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, and so forth. The augmented families, where you have non-relatives within the family structure. So a lot of Black families simply, they'll have a nuclear family, and then they will take in other people who may not have any blood kinship to the family. He talked about the non-family households, and we're seeing this more and more, that people just get together and say, we're a family. There's a show on TV, I think it's called Shameless or some white family, that kind of imitates that kind of stuff. And then there's the
Winbush. But speaking of Shameless, so it was either last year or 2019. The little Black boy. Right. So Shameless has a little Black boy.
They always throw one of us in.
Right. And so there was one season where he was in search of himself. So every episode one time he'd have on a big afro with a dashiki. Another time he'd be looking like Malcolm X. He was just going through this exploration, and he sat at the table. There was a scene. I wish we had pulled that up. And he says, he asked for some money. And the sister says, why? And he says, I want to take a DNA test.
Wow.
And she says something like, well, you already know your father or something. And he says, no, I want to take she says, well, we took one of those tests already. He says, no, I want to take an AfricanAncestry.com test.
All right.
And we all went crazy when we saw that. So, okay, anyway. So that you gave us 3, and then the 4th one?
Well, the 4th one has been a recent vintage, and Billingsley talks about the interracial family, Black folk marrying white folk, and vice versa, which is the minority, by the way. And there's myths about that I've heard it a million times. Well, you brothers get, famous and rich and stuff, you marry a white woman. Approximately 8% of Black men marry white women, and approximately 4% of Black women marry white men. So it's not like these overwhelming numbers that we think, because we operate on a lot of myths. And then he talked about the incipient nuclear, just a husband and wife. And this is like in the white community. The simple nuclear, when you have husband, wife, and children. What did he call it? This segmented nuclear, where you have wife, a single mother with a child, and finally the segmented nuclear 2 with a single father and a child. And there are a lot of single fathers who are Black fathers who are doing well. Slavery hurt the Black family, but we still maintain those kinship ties.
Yeah, and when you talked about the augmented family, I think that's the one where we pull in people who aren't necessarily family. That's a direct response to our families being broken apart and sold apart on a regular basis. We had to create new family structures in order to survive. To your point, the most fundamental structure of a culture.
Right, and we use these terms, Gina, like, well, he's my cousin. And you may not even be related to each other. And there's persistence of, Sheikh Anta Diop wrote the book, Cultural Unity of Black Africa. And the African family is remarkably structured all over the world the same way. Black folk, if I tell you that there's a sister and her name is Peaches, for example. Peaches, that nickname itself has a lot to do with the color, maybe a little bit of rotundish, figure, but that name persists in places like Jamaica, Peaches. So there's a remarkable resiliency and consistency of the Black family throughout the whole world.
Yeah. And I have a question. Where did the saying "it takes a village to raise a child" is that really African, Dr. Winbush?
It's debated. I mean, there's a lot of, we know it comes from East Africa, about the village. We don't know where. I mean, there's been debates about that. I've heard Kenyans say we created that. I've heard, Ghanaians say that, Nigerians. And then I heard, people in Jamaica say that it started in Jamaica. Like Jamaicans will argue with the death that hip hop started there with dancehall. So I think it shows the consistency of our culture. The drum is always present. Black folk hang out on the corner no matter where you go, if you're in Accra or you're in Atlanta. So that consistency would account for us saying or trying to own phrases like it takes a village to make it, to raise a child. Hillary Clinton even took it, as you know, a few years ago.
Right. That's funny. I really was thinking when we started talking about this whole idea of family and how there are so many different family structures, and thank you for outlining the ones based on Dr. Billingsley's research. That's another great reason to have you on the show, because that is what you do. You are grounded in research.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about the research that you are doing now at the Institute for Urban Research. I know that reparations has been a long-standing focus of yours. Can you talk a little bit about the progression? Because you've been part of this reparations conversation since the beginning.
Well, back in the early 90s or either late 80s, I heard Queen Mother Moore, who was like the modern day mother of reparations. She said that everything that Black people are doing is trying to repair the damage created by the transatlantic slave trade, everything. And she said, we may as well forget about affirmative action, go for reparations. And when she said that, that one sentence just changed the course of my research. So I wrote, or edited, I should say, Should America Pay, in the early 90s. It was a play, Randall Robinson, who wrote The Debt. We were doing a workshop up in Toronto. And he told me, he said, Ray, I wrote an essay, because The Debt is like an essay about reparations. He said, you need to write a book with the research in it. So we put together, The Debt, Should America Pay? And, people say now it's like the Bible of the reparations movement, even though it was written 30 years ago, just like the Bible was written 50 years ago, or more than that, I guess. So I've always been focused on reparations, because what Black people have been doing all over the world, not just in the United States, but in the Caribbean, South America, and on the continent, is trying to clean up white folks' mess. That's what we've been trying to do. So reparations have nothing to do with a handout or y'all want charity from the government or something like that. It has everything to do with the issue of justice.
And so what does reparations look like from your perspective, realistically? We're not going to get 40 acres and a mule. What does it look like realistically?
I mean, realistically, reparations are already being implemented in places like Evanston, Illinois, with housing. And just like, Gina, when Brown versus Board went down in early 50s and 54, we're going to find out that as a result of Brown versus Board, which focused on desegregating schools, a few years later, we had affirmative action, Title III, the Voting Rights Act, which Donald Trump just eviscerated in the Supreme Court. Reparations are going to take the same place. Some of these reparations, groups, and I don't want to mention their names even, but they'll talk about, we just want to check. Well, reparations can take a variety of forms. It can take the form of tax breaks. What if, for example, Black people didn't have to pay taxes? And when I'm saying no taxes, I'm talking about sales tax, real estate tax, income tax, for the rest of their lives. That's a form of reparations. Housing, of course, which is reflected in Evanston, Illinois. It can take the form of scholarships. I mean, look at what happened at Georgetown University when they actually, to stay afloat, over 100 years ago, they sold 272 Africans to stay afloat. So it could take the form of scholarship. So reparations are going to take, and some people will get a check in the mail. Some people will get a check, but by and large, it's going to take a variety of forms, just like the civil rights movement did.
What do you think about Wendy, you read my mind. Frederick says reparations should include repatriation to Africa. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, absolutely. My Caribbean brothers, you know, CARICOM is the organization that pulls together. I've talked to several Rastas in Trinidad as well as Jamaica. Sir Hilary Beckles is a good friend of mine, Jamaican brother that's head of the University of West Indies. And there's some Africans, and not only in the Caribbean, but here said, look, just give me $100,000 and a one-way trip to my country of choice in Africa. So repatriation is clearly a part of reparations. My friend Charles Barron up in New York, the assemblyman, he says, you know, he believes if you give reparations all cash, that we're going to pour money back into the system that created the problem in the first place. So repatriation, I'm all for that. Absolutely.
I wonder if some could argue that. So, well, let me ask you what you think about this. So we often get the question, why isn't the African ancestry test free? And the government should pay for it. And, you know, the African ancestry testing should be part of a repatriation. I mean, oh my gosh, a reparations plan. And I always come back with the fact of, if the government was going to give you a DNA test, would you take it? Because for as many people who suggest that the government should pay for it, there's someone who's going to say, I don't want the government to have my DNA. Where do you stand on that?
Well, see, look, you're in business, and it's not like you charge. You know, I'm always amazed when Africans, often, not every African, but we'll go to Kmart, they'll treat us bad, but we'll come, well, they ain't got Kmart anymore. Let's go to Walmart. We'll go to Walmart, they'll treat us bad. We keep going back to Walmart. We need to be supporting our Black businesses. You're in a business, and I'm not just, you ain't paying me to do this, but you know, why not give your money to a sister and a brother that are helping for us to understand who we are? You know, I'm not trying to say that, you know, eventually reparation, you know, tracing ancestry won't be a part of a reparations program. But right now, it would be like saying, well, look, you should teach at an HBCU where I teach for free. You know, we got to make a living too, and we need to pay, you know, pay the bills. You're providing a service to help our people understand who they are and where they came from.
Wendi, I did an interview today, and someone asked me, why is it important to know where you came from? So what's your answer to that question?
Because, you know, a tree without roots, I mean, it's what Malcolm said, a tree without a knowledge of its roots, you just don't know where you are. You know, I was given a workshop right before the pandemic to a group of young Black boys. They were about 12, 13 years old. And I asked the question, where did you come from? And one of the boys raised his hand and he said, you know, how did you get here? He said, I got here on a Greyhound bus. That's how Black people got to America. Well, see, in his small mind, and it was appropriate for his age, I guess, we have to give knowledge of self. You'll hear white folks saying things like, you know, my great-great-granddaddy 3 times removed came over on the Mayflower or landed at Ellis Isle. Most Black folk cannot trace their ancestry back more than 3 generations. I've been fortunate that I've been doing this genealogical research. I've got my ancestry back to 1806. And I think that's a long time. And then I'm running into the slavery barrier, as I call it. We have to know everything about where we come from. Otherwise, the system of white supremacy will define us. And we need to define us. It's one of the principles of Kwanzaa, you know, Kuji Chagalia, that we determine who we are. And, you know, DNA testing helps that. Genealogical research helps that as well. We need to know where we're connected.
We had a sister on last week as our guest. Her name is Shelby Walker, and she gave us a genealogy 101 lesson. She has a foundation called the Great Foundation, and they actually do genealogical research for anybody, but they focus on adoptees and children in foster care system, or people who were in the foster care system. And she talked about, how genealogy and genetic ancestry testing, just like you said, go hand in hand. And there's a friend of mine who talks about that's how we can honor the ancestors.
It is. It's a form of, because we need to know what our ancestors went through, who they come. You may not remember this, Gina, but when I did a warrior circle, when we had a small grant from the Will and Jada Pinkett Smith Foundation, you did the DNA research for all of the people that were in that study group, which I took to Africa. And it was just amazing when people found out where they were from, their ancestors were from. And then they got to go. One of them was from Ghana. And when they found that out, we went to Ghana. She cried. I never will forget this. So I think it's almost a spiritual experience, and it's a spiritual journey to know where we came from, because there was so much in among, the transatlantic slave trade that disrupted that. And we have to restore those links, and we honor the ancestors when we do.
Plachette makes a good comment, a good point. She says, I hear a lot of people who will tell me they are from America, not Africa. I figured because they don't know beyond the plantation, they feel ashamed of not knowing and prefer to be in denial. Where do you think that comes from?
It shows the effectiveness and the success of the system of white supremacy that erases our memory. I was in Jamaica a few years ago, and I was giving this lecture, and the sister came up to me afterwards, and she said, well, how do you know I came from Africa? Because I told everybody, and I said, where do you think, who lived in Jamaica before Africans lived in Jamaica? She said, I don't know. And so I started talking about the Arawak people and others, the Taino who lived in Haiti and other stuff like that. I said, how do you think you got here? She said, well, I guess I did come from Africa. I think that we just feel that we're so immersed in America that that's who we are. There's a Ghanaian proverb that says a fish does not know it is wet because it's swimming. It doesn't get up in the morning. Fish doesn't get up in the morning, Gina said, boy, it sure is wet out here. They're just swimming in it. And we're swimming in an ocean of white supremacy that is by nature anti-African. It wants you to think white. It wants you to act white. It rewards you for doing that.
I read The Warrior Method, your book, A Parent's Guide to Rearing Healthy Black Boys, and I felt like so much of that could apply even to adults. We're all children in some respect when it comes to knowing who we are. And I wonder if you could touch on the Warrior Method, since we're talking about functioning in this system that goes against who we are. What are some of the things we can do with our kids to offset that, head that off from the beginning?
Well, I wrote that book in the 90s. I'm amazed that the book is still selling. I just saw one of my former students, Jackie Lepardo's and she just sent me an email yesterday with pictures of her son who she taught the Warrior Method to. I was tired in the 90s of being referred to as an endangered species. It's like we were animals. Black males were animals and stuff. And I said, well, if we're endangered, who's endangering us? Lions and zebras and giraffes don't get up in the morning and say, we're endangered. And I tried to point the finger to the system of white supremacy and then provide a method for raising Black boys as well as Black girls in a system that counterbalances what is poured down our throats as Africans in this country. So the Warrior Method just simply centers Black people. On Africa, I think to the degree that Black people are decentered, that they don't understand that their ancestors are African, I think that means that they're crazy. So in a place like Birmingham, Alabama, when the 4 little girls were bombed, there was a sister there that knew one of the girls, and another sister there that knew one of the girls that was killed in that tragedy. One of them was Angela Davis, and the other one was Condoleezza Rice. So you can see a warrior and somebody who has succumbed to the system of white supremacy, raised just a few blocks apart in the same city, but one had a totally different consciousness. And what the warrior method does is simply provide ways, very practical ways of raising our children so that they have a consciousness as a Black person.
Ashe. So I want to encourage everybody. You can still buy the book. We put the book in the book title in the chat. All of these books, really, Should America Pay, Belinda's Petition, The Warrior Method, but especially The Warrior Method, since we're at a time where there is an assault on our children. There's an assault on the education of our children, and many parents and families are looking for materials to help augment their children's education, or for themselves as tools, or for content for the children. So I want to encourage everybody to check those books out. We cannot let you go without talking. You touched on it, but I want some more dish on the research that you did for Judas and the Black Messiah. Why did they choose you? I know why they chose you, but I want everybody else to know how that came to be. And unlike some movies, this one was lauded for the accuracy and the relevancy of the content. And I think that has a lot to do with you. You get all the credit, Dr. Winbush. So can you?
I get some of it. I mean, real quick, one of my students at Vanderbilt was Charles King. And I remember when I was teaching there, he would always follow me around. He's like a little nerd, He said, "Ray, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do?" And I said, "I would make positive films about Black folk." And so he said, "That's what I'm going to do." So, he's a student, and I'm kind of saying, okay, I didn't want to discourage him. Well, Charles King is now the biggest producer in Hollywood other than Tyler Perry. He produced films such as Denzel Washington, Fences, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So I didn't know that Charles was the same Charles, because his name is Charles King, that I had taught. Well, one day I was sitting in my apartment, late at night, and the phone rang, and I looked at it. It was a California call. And the person said, "May I speak to Ray Winbush?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "This is Ryan Coogler." And I said, "Well, the only Ryan Coogler I know is the one that directed Black Panther." And he said, "Well, that's who this is." And I said, "Who is this?" I thought it was one of my students like playing a joke on me or something, but it really was him. And he told me, and this was right at the time, 3 years ago, when Black Panther was out, and he said that he wanted to make a film about a real Black Panther, and that Charles King, my student, had recommended that he contact me. What coincidentally, I was in Chicago 6 months after Fred Hampton was killed, working on my doctorate. So I was very present with that. So Shaka King, the director, we just all got together. I met Coogler up in Chicago. We had dinner. We decided what we were going to do. And I started doing the research. We went, and there's a lot to making a film. He wanted me to find out how buildings looked at the time of the assassination of Fred Hampton. How were people dressed in 1969 and so forth. And so I just provided pictures, dug it up, and it was hard digging up some of this stuff. And then we wanted to point the finger at the FBI. The city of Chicago did not cooperate with us at all in the making of the film. It was shot primarily in Cleveland, Ohio, my hometown. And Lori Lightfoot, the mayor, didn't help us at all, but I don't want to get into that. So we pointed the finger at the FBI. We made sure it was authentic. The one part that we did change if you've seen the film, the Crowns, the gang that, Fred Hampton wanted to get in was really the Blackstone Nation. And that's because Jeff Ford is still in prison in Illinois. And we just wanted, out of respect, not to, even though that's who it was in the film. So it's a very accurate film. I was very proud to be a part of it.
I love that. And I was very proud to see your name associated with it. It's, you are one of the pillars that makes the community strong. And it's not just your dedication to students. You've taught at Fisk, right? You taught at Fisk, you've taught at, you're teaching at Morgan still at a time when you don't really have to teach, but you've paid your teaching dues, but you're still teaching. Where else have you taught?
I taught at Vanderbilt, Alabama A&M, and Oakwood, primarily in HBCUs. I always tell people I served a 14-year sentence at Vanderbilt. But some of my students, like I said, they came out. We tried to make sure, or I tried to make sure, that they had an African orientation to their knowledge. And again, I'm very proud of it.
Yeah. So
one of my students, let me say, one of my students was Michelle Alexander at Vanderbilt, the one that wrote The New Jim Crow. I'm very proud of the work that she's done on mass incarceration.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a pillar as a professor, as a scholar, as an activist, and as a researcher. I mean, that's part of what makes you a scholar. But I really appreciate that you make research tangible. I think one of the first presentations I saw that you give was, I feel like it was in Baltimore for some reason. But anyway, it was you were talking about the perception of the Black man in media.
Yeah, I remember that.
All based on research. It wasn't just what you thought. You had all the research to back it up. And that is a good feeling, to see our scholars making research accessible to everyone.
Yeah, well, I agree. And you're a pillar too. You're being modest about that. But it's very important, I think, for Black scholars. Nathan here, the father of modern Black studies, said that Black people need to get out of the ivory tower. Black scholars need to get out of the ivory tower and be in the ebony tower. And the ebony tower is when you connect town and gown, scholar with community. And I've always tried to do that, always.
Well, thank you for doing an excellent job. Thank you for creating the literature that we can all reference. Thank you for sharing yourself with the community. And I'm looking forward to the next phase of research that I know you're working on undercover, it's under wraps. Nobody can talk about it, but hopefully it's something that you will be able to talk about soon. And we won't get you back on the line. December?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll make sure that at the very least we share it with the African Ancestry family while you're taking your Zoom breaks. But we'll get you back on in 2022, hopefully.
For sure, and it's good. I see another one of my students, Carolyn Pitt, there. How you doing, Carolyn?
Yeah, your students are representing.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay, but look, anytime, let me know. Keep doing the work you're doing too, Gina.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was telling you offline that we have a whole team that is invested in doing this work, a nuclear team within African Ancestry, and then an extended team of Black-owned businesses.
It's good.
Services we use to support our business. So when someone purchases a test kit, and I encourage everyone, if you haven't traced your maternal ancestry yet, someone put in the chat that they found out from myheritage.com that they were 1% Nigerian. I don't know how informative that was for you, sir, but if you trace your ancestry with African Ancestry, there's a very good chance that we can tell you the present day country and ethnic group and show you the actual part of your DNA that you share with those people. That's what we do over here. But when you purchase a product from African Ancestry, if you already have a kit, maybe it's a mask, maybe it's a t-shirt, maybe it's our study guide, a pendant, whatever it is, recycling. We're recycling your Black dollars.
That's right.
And so that's very important too. The buck doesn't stop with us. We don't take your money and then give it to a bunch of people that don't look like us. We give as much of it as humanly possible to those who look like us. And we're very proud of that. August is Black Business Month. So you guys get ready. For those of you who need more encouragement to spend your money with Black businesses, there's going to be a whole push you'll see in society to do that in August. So everybody, I want you to join me in thanking Dr. Winbush for being here. I want to see some hand claps. I want to see some flags. I want to see some books. I want to see whatever it is you got that represents the greatness of this man. I wish we had a reparations emoji. We could throw that up.
They need one.
Yeah, somebody needs to get on that. Somebody in the chat, if you can make emojis, I'm tasking you with a reparations emoji. The world has begun to open up, but there are still plenty of places where you must and or should wear your mask. So please continue to do that when you're out. Please continue to just use common sense, right? Follow the directions. Just be a good corporate citizen. I wanted to fly Dr. Winbush, and I had some anxiety because people are acting a fool on planes. I'm like, can you just follow the directions for 2 hours, 3, whatever it is, just follow the damn directions. Anyway, continue to support your immune system. Wendi will tell you that. That's what's gotten us through this. And continue to support your mental health. Even though some may say the pandemic is over or is ending, that doesn't mean its effects are going away. And we are still experiencing the effects, and maybe even a new type of effect, as we have to figure out how to readjust and re-enter and remember who we were and how we acted before a pandemic. So please continue to do that for yourself and those you love. And until we meet again, everybody, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you be whole. Everyone have a very good night, and thanks again for joining us. Take care.